Hello, my friends. I am popping in before the episode to let you all know we have a very special episode of Runnah planned for you today because I had the privilege of being a guest on the Paincave to Power podcast. And we have the audio, yes, only the audio recording of that podcast guest episode. So I am giving that to you today as a little kind of holiday bonus. Juliana gets to take a little bit of time for herself because, as many of you have seen already or heard, my health is probably the worst it's ever been. Ever. It's bad. And so, I'm currently struggling just to make it through each day alive and only cry 12 times at a absolute maximum. So, it's been really fun. It's been a lot of fun. And enjoy a aptly named podcast guest appearance with me and the two lovely ladies from the Paincave to Power podcast. And I will see you guys on our next episode of Runnah, which will be another shoe-eating monster episode. And then we have a lovely guest booked in for the next episode that is an interview style. So don't worry, there will be more interviews coming. And send any good vibes you got left because I am running at an absolute well of nothing. Okay, enjoy. I'll see you guys soon.
So today we're joined by someone who embodies the heart of what Paincave to Power is all about: advocacy and authenticity and courage to show up fully in the running community. Juliana Coughlin is a marathoner, trail and ultra running advocate, a storyteller, and a registered dietitian with 9 years of experience. She spent the last 7 years in social media, creative production, and podcasting, where she's helped brands and communities grow with voice, intention, and real connection. She's the host of Runnah, a podcast rooted in the running community that she loves, a space where she highlights athletes, local races, and the stories that move us. As a runner living with chronic biomechanical and neurological challenges, Juliana is deeply passionate about advocating for female identifying athletes and athletes with disabilities, especially in the trail and ultra spaces where representation has historically been lacking. Whether she's creating content, announcing races, building community programs, Juliana's mission is clear: make movement more inclusive, joyful, and accessible for everyone. So with that, Juliana, we are truly honored to have you here today.
That was like an ego trip, if anything. I'm like, wow, you are great, Juliana. Look at all the things that you're doing. Anyone, I had
you
to
are.
like anyone, I've been following the roller coaster of the day. It was good and then a little bit of a dip, and now I'm just like, wow, I'm killing it. Look at me.
Should feel proud of all those achievements.
I'm excited to be here, ladies. I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited to be that advocate because, we need more female identifying humans in not only the trail and ultra community, but in the running community and just advocating for themselves in general. And, whether I'm happy to do it sometimes or not, at least most of the time, I'm happy to just kind of share my experiences, and hopefully that helps us advocate a little bit more. But I feel like my intro set me off on a really high pedestal that hopefully I'll live up to during this interview. Try my best.
I think you will. I think all three of us are pretty badass in our own different respects and unique ways. So I think that we're all in good company here.
Very good.
Yeah. I definitely respect both you ladies quite a lot too. So I'm excited to be here. Excited to provide some kind of insight, hopefully.
You will. So just tell us a little bit about your running journey and how you found your way into trail and ultra running.
Yeah, I'll give you the abbreviated Juliana gets started in running story because it's kind of long. It's not long, but it's not really that interesting, I don't think. I started running mostly because my best friend in high school, I didn't do track or any kind of running in high school, middle school, whatever. My best friend in high school, Lydia, when we were in our senior year, she was like, Juliana, I have a crazy idea. I was like, what is it, Lydia? She's like, I want to run a mile every day after school. Do you want to do it with me? I was like, let's do it. That's crazy. And so this is what we did. And then me and my mom did the Couch to 5K program after she saw us doing that. And then I just kind of like recreationally started running to stay in shape. I'd say the funniest part of my running journey is that my very first road race was the Falmouth Road Race, which is the namesake road race of the town that I now live in. And at that time, I did not live in Falmouth. I lived in a different part of Massachusetts. I'd never heard of Falmouth. I'd never run a road race before. My aunt Tina was like, guys, you should put your name in for this like weird 7-mile road race because it's a weird distance. It's originally a bar crawl race where the guys just were like, I'll buy you a beer if you get to that X bar faster than me, whatever. And so so you can find the history of that somewhere else. It's whatever. But I ran that race and it was my first road race like ever, ever, ever. And then about, 10 years later, I ended up moving here for a dietitian job. And this has been like the best thing that's ever happened to me has been moving here because Falmouth like is such a running and walking centered community. Like we are a population that loves to be outside. Like as soon as the sun comes out and it's like it's above 40 degrees, everyone is outside. Like we are all outside. You can run around here and even just on like your daily runs, people will like clap for you and like cheer you on and give you high fives. And that's just kind of the vibe here. And it's a nice time. But yeah, so I started running and then started taking up more road races. I ran my first half marathon, I think in 2016, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong. Was like, I could do that again. Also, after I finished that first half marathon, I was like, how do people do this? I'm dead. I slept for like 5 hours afterwards. Flash forward to today where I ran like 11 miles and I'm like, I'm ready to go, guys. And like, just like revving or like rock and roll, where I'm like, I could have gone further. But then moved to the Falmouth, ran the Cape Cod Marathon as my very first marathon. And then ran the Chowder Challenge the next year because, sucker for pain, I guess, which is the half marathon and the full marathon back to back, which kind of was like my introduction into ultra marathon running in retrospect. I just did it because I was like, that's kind of cool. I want to do that. That's kind of badass. And so did that, finished it, and then kind of got to the point where I was like thinking about running an ultra marathon and ended up like having my now best friend Ben, who has run a bunch of like mountain ultras, like 50 and 100 milers. And I was like, hey, Ben, do you think I could run an ultra marathon? He's like, Juliana, one, you kind of already have. And two, yes, you can definitely do that. And so I actually trained and I ran my first ultra marathon, like official, like on paper ultra marathon, ultra sign up record now in May, and I actually won the Watuppa 50K. So that was really cool. And then I proceeded to attempt to do a 50 miler in this fall and slammed my head twice, slammed my chest once, ended up with like a few like pretty solid injuries, as you do, and got my first ever like DNF that I have a lot of pride in. Thank you so much. They didn't have my results up on the website. And I emailed them. I was like, you will be putting my DNF up on that website. I worked very hard for that DNF. Like, don't discount me. Like, and technically I ran like 27 miles that day still, but like, it was still like, yeah, it was not the 50-mile distance. So I technically didn't finish that, but I still worked pretty hard for that DNF. And I said, you know what, you will be putting that up there. So that's kind of the shorter version. But here we are right now doing trail stuff.
That's awesome. Congratulations on your race and your DNF. Sometimes I feel like the DNFs are so much more fun. Sometimes maybe a little bit more in depth of this story. I've had a couple, and I
Mhm.
feel like I've learned so much from that, but also learning how to like say, this might not be a good idea for me, and holding that space
Yeah.
and honoring that space you're in to I don't wanna fall again, or I don't wanna hurt myself further,
Yeah.
and some people kinda, like, look at that like, I'd rather be dead last or have a bone sticking out before I pull
Mhm.
out. race, but it's like, no, I want to run for the rest of my life. So
Hmm.
good on you for honoring where you were that day and saying, I earned that DNF. I made it 27 miles. And then I said, I'm good now.
Yeah, I was very proud of myself for, like, being a mature human and stepping away and, like, fully realizing I was like, "Today is not the day for you, Juliana," and, like, it's better to live to fight another day with some, like, not the best, but, like, minor, in retrospect, like, injuries. I did hit my head, but I didn't end up getting, like, any concussion or anything. I just had, like, a pretty solid bruise, like, all through here on my face for a little bit. But
Mm.
it was just kind of choosing to do that instead of, like, keeping going where I could feel that if I kept going the whole 50 miles, I would be coming away with a pretty significant injury and, like, be pushing my body to the point of absolutely no return. So I was like, "No, no, no, we're good. We're gonna be a mature human today," and just, like, walk away in largely one piece. So I totally identify with what you're saying, and that's hard. It's harder to walk away than it is to keep going. Also, Ben, who I mentioned, he and I talked about my DNF on my podcast and also off when we were running. And he was just like, "Oh yeah, I prefer to DNF because then I learned so much more. I'd rather know how I failed and know how to work on that than win and not know why I won." I'm
Right.
like, "Yeah, that's good. That's a
And
good point."
I feel like with those, like, you missed the mark, but
Mhm,
that mark can be moving at the same time and it changes
mhm.
throughout a race. And like you said about basically, I was a mature human in making that decision. We live in such a, in our community where it's like, unless you're dead, like, don't
Yeah,
quit.
keep
And that
going.
can be so unhealthy if you
Yeah,
sit in that narrative, especially out on a trail, and it's like, "Well, I'm not dying, bones are still attached, but how can this affect me long term?" And just
yeah,
honoring that space, I think, is so fine-tuned per person, but also just being able to recognize, like, "This isn't good for me." Or even a dear friend of mine said, like, "I just Forrest Gumped it." And it's like, I
yeah.
had enough. And that's okay too. It's like whatever
Mhm,
space you're in to be able to say, like, "I'm good." And walk away, and
mhm.
I think that's way more mature than trying to grind it out until you can't move anymore for weeks after.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely and it takes a lot of strength to be able to just say, "I'm done with this." Like, I had this goal, I can't like, is I could reach it potentially, like, there's still that, like, little bit of, like, glimmering hope at the end of the tunnel, but, like, everything else in your body is telling you, like, this is a really bad idea, and that's what internally my body was like, my brain was like, "Absolutely not, Juliana, this is so dumb, like, what are you doing?" Uh, pretty much as soon as I stepped foot on that trail before I even had even gone a mile, but, like, that's a whole other part to the story, you know? But, but it just, like, listening to those voices, and I think the biggest thing is, like, knowing yourself and knowing yourself well enough to know that, like, "Okay, these are where my known limits lie, and I know what it feels like to push myself hard in a way that is, like, productive, and I also know what it feels like to push myself in a way that is very unproductive and is just gonna set me back." And learning to listen to your body is also really challenging and requires a lot of self introspection and possibly some therapy. I know on my side, definitely some therapy. And just being able to listen to yourself is really freaking hard, man. It's not easy.
Well, and I think it's a balance, right? I think you're constantly balancing
Hmm.
between like pushing yourself, to find your upper limit and your potential and to like
Hmm.
meet your standards and expectations. But then it's also, you have to factor in, sometimes it's just not the right race. It's not the right
Yeah.
setting. It's not the right time of your life. It's not like your health can be at risk. Like we talk about, well, the question, well, did you die? It's like, well, some people have died doing even just half
Yeah.
marathons or marathons. And
Hmm.
so I think, we can't say like the risk is zero because it's not. And we have to always continually find that balance between like pushing ourselves, but also, keeping ourselves in a space where we can run another race in the future.
Yeah. It's one thing if it's a race where you're like, this is like a one time, like, this is my dream race forever. And like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to come back here. Like you get into the Antarctica marathon or whatever it is, and it costs you like $20,000, and like you're not actually going to die. You're just going to be injured, not just. Like that's a totally different story than like the race I did where I paid $25 for the entry. I can come back next year. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
matter that I didn't finish. Like there's nothing. There's no prize money. There's nothing on the line. Like there's nothing. The only thing I'm sacrificing is my pride. That's it. And that's the hardest thing to freaking sacrifice 99% of the time. And just being able to be honest with yourself and tell yourself like that, even that's the case. I feel like it's a good skill to have, especially if you are technically also putting your life on the line too and be like, okay, what is actually on the line? Is it something actually important? Like, do I have to get to the finish line to like save someone's life or something? Or is it just my pride? Because if it's just your pride, then you can leave that on the trail and you can come back for it another time. It's still going to be there for you.
Absolutely.
So, at what point did your storytelling and podcasting kind of merge together with your identity as like an athlete and a runner?
Oh, I like that you called me an athlete. That's like, wow, look at me being an athlete. So I started my podcast Runnah, which is spelled Runnah, which is how you pronounce the word in Massachusetts. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a quick look into what exactly the podcast is, running in Massachusetts, generally speaking. And it kind of congealed itself last fall. I had this idea of starting this podcast for at least like 3 or 4 years beforehand, just because I work behind the scenes at the Cape Cod Marathon, which is our local marathon here on the Cape, which is fantastic and fabulous, and everyone should come run it. But it it really opened my eyes to be behind the scenes for that and to see like one how much happens behind the scenes at any race to make it happen and how runners are so centered around themselves that we don't see anything else that's happening and we just think about ourselves, which is how it should be. The race should happen around you and you should just be able to show up and run, and that if that's a well run race then that should be what's happening largely, and we really pride ourselves in that at the Cape Cod Marathon. But I was able to meet a lot of the people who are behind the scenes, and just like through meeting a lot of people who also live in Falmouth, Falmouth is a very like highly local but highly global community all at the same time, because the Falmouth Road Race is like one, there are largely two ways to get into the Falmouth Road Race: lottery system, and if you're a resident of the town. And so like 50% of the people who run the Falmouth Road Race every year are Falmouth residents. And then a large portion of it is the lottery people. And then we also have Olympic athletes who come in. So it's like you live down the street or you've won an Olympic medal. Like that's kind of the caliber of people who are showing up to this race. And it's kind of the caliber of like the whole town. Like Frank Shorter lives up in North Falmouth somewhere. Like Joan Benoit Samuelson has a vacation home down here. Like there are people who just like have big titles, who just do big things and just live down the street. And they're just normal humans who live in this town. And that's kind of the vibe here. And a lot of people who have worked on like the Boston Marathon or like run big races or won big races, like the guy who like for 30 years, I'm going to have him on my podcast shortly, was like the director of the Boston Marathon finish line and was the first person to like to contact the winner, like get the winner from the chute, lives down the street. I didn't realize this. So like things like this where it's just like we have so many cool connections to like not only the things that we're actually doing like now, like with running, because we have a very active running community here, but like we're so interconnected to the globe and there are so many stories to be told here. And also just like from my side too, like I love to talk. If people hadn't like realized that already. And I also like have like a theater background and like a singing background. So like I also like to do performing things. So I kind of like had those two things come together when I started working with our local TV station for some stuff for the Cape Cod Marathon. And I was like, hey, do you guys think this would be a good idea for a show? And they were like, that's great, Juliana. I was like, you got it. And that was just like the little kick in the butt that I needed to actually take action on it. And so far it's been great because it's done exactly what I'd wanted it to do, was to bring the community closer together and to let people like hear other stories from other people in the community, discover new like resources to them. Like we've had a lot of people from this organization called Wellstrong on, which is
Oh,
a physical activity centered recovery center that helps people like retain and get into recovery through physical activity, whether it's yoga, Pilates, running, whatever the members want. But they're doing so much wonderful things in the community. But I've been able to like showcase them and have other people find out that this is a resource that they can utilize, which I think is fabulous. So things like that, or like discovering that like a lot of people didn't realize we had a trail race in town. I was like, we do, and here they are. And like just being able to do that has really been like the kind of the key point of it. And also just like letting other people know that if they're going through something while they're running, they're definitely not alone either, which is definitely a big tentpole of just me existing as a human. I like to let people know that they're not alone. Hopefully that answered the question that you had.
No, that's incredible. I mean, I just love listening to all that and how interconnected it sounds like. And don't mind my rainbow thing going on here. I have light behind me drives me nuts. But just how interconnected and how integrated it seems the community is, and that you're able to hold a space to bring people together through the podcast, but just your role in the community. And it sounds like something that is so supportive. I love that you touched on recovery, because that's a part of my story. And so many
Yeah.
of us trail that we identify with that piece, and to feel safe somewhere and to feel validated and that be brought to the forefront is so important. So that's beautiful that that is a big part of like your day to day.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I mean, honestly, some of my favorite people I've met, like I didn't realize they were like in recovery, and two have come out as like telling me all these things because like of the podcast. And I'm just like, I love all these. These are my favorite people now. And like, I even just had my episode that's coming out this coming week as we were speaking is with Jim, who is the executive director of the Boston Bulldogs, which is exclusively a running club for people and family or anyone who's touched by someone with addiction or in recovery. And just the way hearing him talk about the work that they do there was just so wonderful. And we just had such a good conversation, and being able to like share again, like share different resources, like share all these different parts of the community with everyone. And also kind of in a way, like kind of break that stereotype of like that perfect person who's like a really disciplined runner. And like everyone is just like running 6-minute miles, because that's definitely my life. And was like super speedy and runs the Boston Marathon every year. And it's just like type A, like stick thin, like that like really awful like stereotype that people think of when they think of runners, like people who are very exclusive and just like kind of snotty when it comes to how they approach running. They only ever wear Nikes, that person. So like that person still exists. Like, I'm not going to discount their existence. That's still a real person, but they're in the vast minority of people who are out there. And being able to see all these different humans who are out here doing their things, like people who have cancer, people who are in recovery, people who are veterans. We have this really wonderful group called Ruck for Hit that does a rucking thing, that it's like a kind of like a Ragnar event, except with their rucking at the same time. So it's like a 3-day overnight like big thing that they do for this charity called Heroes in Transition, that they have, obviously they help people transition from the service life into civilian life. And it's a lot of the people who are part of that are either military spouses, family members, or ex-military themselves. And it's definitely something that I think is needed. And it's like, you can't just like have someone feel like killing people and then be like, well, now you go live as a civilian, like baking bread. It's like, no, that transition's a little bit rockier than that, my friend. We need a little bit of help here. Uh, but just being able to like show people that there are other people that are like them, that are out there doing hard things, I think is really like one of my key standing points with Runnah, and also just me as a human too.
But what barriers do you still see the most often for like the underrepresented athletes in the trail ultra community? Like what are we still
Yeah.
lacking as far as like accessibility and making sure everyone does feel inclusive?
I think like the disability side of things is definitely hard. I understand why it's really hard in the trail community too, because of the varied terrain, and people like being scared to fall and things like that, or if you're someone who's like wheelchair bound, how it makes it a lot more challenging to partake in something like that, and how you'd have to get like separate like equipment, even on the road, like having to like get a racing wheelchair. Like over the summer, we had I think it was the 45th running of the wheelchair division for the Falmouth Road Race, and I was able to interview 3 of the wheelchair athletes who are now my favorite people in the entire world, and I want nothing more than to spend all my time with the wheelchair athletes. But having to talk, like being able to talk to them and hear, like, one, how much it costs for a racing chair. Like, it's like $15,000 for a racing chair. There's one person I spoke to who is, I think she's 15 now. Her name is Maddie. And she obviously is a growing person. Like she's like a young adult. She's growing. So her height is like changing. And so the size of her chair keeps needing to change. And like talking to them about like that, and her dad and her about like renting chairs and finding chairs, and like talking to some of my friends who I've now made the wheelchair community about like transporting the chairs, like the fact that you have to get like a custom size like suitcase, and these things are freaking humongous. Like they fit a full size human in these things, plus more than that. So if you need any type of adaptive equipment to partake in the sport, it definitely makes it like 5 million times more challenging, not only because of the price, but like transporting it, keeping up with the maintenance of it, and just like finding someone who can like help you like get in and out of things largely sometimes, especially if you're like exhausted at the end of a marathon. Like you're not going to have the strength to like, it's like us walking up the stairs after a big race. They have a hard time getting themselves out of their chair, or whatever, their adaptive footwear or whatever it is. I feel like that's definitely something that the whole community needs to work on the whole, is just making things like more accessible from like any kind of disability standpoint. And also, I think, like, definitely when it comes to, like, female identifying people being part of, like, the trail and ultra community, that's definitely something that's been, like, largely male dominated for, like, a really long time. And, like, I'm someone who, like, I'm not a most my 2 best friends are guys. And, like, I'm not even traditionally, like, a guys. I hate sports. Like, I don't know anything about cars. Like, nothing about me shouts that should have 2 best friends who are guys. Uh but yet I do. And I will say one of them is, like, very effeminate, and the other one's, like, just, like, a little bit more femme than, like, a bro guy, you know? But it definitely it's hard to be part of the trail running community when it's just so male dominated. And the point I was getting to, sorry, I'm someone who, like, when I show up to a starting line, there's other guy it's like me and some guys, I'm like, "I'm gonna beat these guys. I'm gonna beat the shit out of these guys," because, like, they think I'm a woman and I'm not, like, competition, and, like, I'm gonna show them wrong. But I understand that that's not most people's mentality when they show up to the starting line and it's all guys. But it shouldn't be that way either, though. You shouldn't have to be on that defensive side of things, of, like, putting your guard up when you show up to a starting line. And I will say, the trail community largely, especially in the ultra community, is very accepting. Like, the higher up the distance you get, the weirder the people get, and I love it. I think it's great. So, things like that, just kind of breaking down those barriers, and like me even being able to be like a voice of someone's like, I'm interested in doing this, and like seeing at least one other female identifying person in the space, I think is like something that's definitely helped other people. I can think of like 2 people who are my friends now off the bat who were like, I don't really want to, like, is there other women who are part of this? And I'm like, yeah, there are, but like you could totally do it. Like you got this, you know? And just being able to be that like that voice, like confirming in for some people that they can try it and it's okay if they don't like it, but if they want to do it they should, I think is really powerful too. And just being able to be part of that, you know, and hopefully get more ladies and more female identifying people into the space. I think it's a great thing. There's always room for more. Hopefully that answered the question. I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent.
That was perfect.
So I guess like I mean, because I'm a race director, so I like always want to be thinking, and I've had like I have a lot of
Oh, what
thoughts
race?
I have not implemented yet. That I have a long to do list and
Okay.
idea
Okay.
list and dream list and goal list. Like I'm constantly challenging myself to in many different ways. But
Uh-huh.
one of the biggest things I'm always like asking myself is like, how can I make it more inclusive? And like, what would if I can imagine any like space as a race or a running space in general,
Mhm.
like what would a truly inclusive space look like? And like how do you figure like
Yeah.
first what is it? And then how do I implement the logistics
Yeah.
of it all?
I think for me, like I'm thinking first off, what race do you direct? I must know now.
So I have 4 races. I have the New River Trail races in April,
Okay.
and that's in Freeze, Virginia.
Okay.
I have a new race called the Wood Booger, which is in Norton, Virginia, and that's a 100 miler. And then
Oh, that's
the
fun.
Crystal Springs in Whitfield,
Oh, okay, that's
Virginia,
tempting.
and then Damascus Festival of Miles in Damascus, Virginia.
Oh, okay. That's a lot of fun. Love
And they're
that.
all like
Okay.
different.
Put
They're
one of
so
I'm
those on my
excited
bucket
for
list.
June.
unique.
Yeah, wood booger sounds like a fun one. Maybe do that. But so like inclusivity, I have two things that are popping into my head. One is like feelings based, and one is like something that we've done for the Cape Cod Marathon. So I'll share like the example of like one small thing that we did this year that like really had like a good response and like was something that we were like, why weren't we doing this already? But was just like a small step to making things more inclusive. This year at all of our aid stations, we started including like tampons and pads.
Yeah.
So something that we hadn't done previously. And we're like, someone else had mentioned that they were doing that. We're like, why aren't we doing that? That's so stupid. Why have we not been doing this? Two out of the three people who are in like the helm of the Cape Cod Marathon, me and Kathy, like we're ladies. Like, why did we not think of this?
Well, and
So
I think
just those like
it's
small little
never if you've not been to
actions.
races that have it, like, we don't even think about it. We don't even think about it like that because 'cause we've just always been
Yeah.
expected wherever we go to bring our own.
To bring our stuff with us.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. I think us ladies are, and people who menstruate are very good about because we've had to learn to be very good about bringing our own products with us. So whatever your product of choice is, and yeah, so we had that one little small action is something that like we saw even more inclusivity. And like last year, we just started allowing people to be in a non-binary category at our race, and I'm constantly pushing we're trying to like make it so we can have some like non-binary like race money, but right now like there's not enough people in the category to like really warrant that. So that's kind of like a little thing, and like we're trying to like bring it like this year also last year we started offering free entry to anyone who like wants to be part of our adaptive division. So like if you identify as an adaptive athlete and you would like to come participate in any of our distances, like you can get a free entry like that's we're trying to do like little things like that. I think for me, like as someone who's like a vibes-based empathy, like energy-based human who is now entering her witch phase of her life, I am actively committing acts of witchery. I made tea. I'm working on my first tea is confidence tea. I'm working on my enthusiasm tea right now, Each tea bag gets a pep talk. We're sharing that good energy. But I think it's honestly just like being able to curate the energy around an event to be non-judgmental, I think is like one of the biggest things that I've found that like being on that side of things, like being the social media director and like the media person for our marathon and kind of being I'm like the visible face of the Cape Cod Marathon. I am the person that I'm sure when people think of the Cape Cod Marathon, I pop into their heads because I'm on our social media. I announce our finish line. Like I'm actively in the expo when they show up. Like I opened the expo up this year for anyone who came the first day. So like I'm the person who like if we need to do any kind of media, like Kathy and Jack send me out into the field because I'm more than happy to do it. And I'm also more than happy to answer any questions that people have and kind of just like facilitating that environment of like no stupid questions. And no matter how you show up, like you're more than welcome. And being like really like living that and like spreading that like kind of vibe out to the people who are our volunteers. Like, and luckily, like Kathy and Jack are on the same exact page with me, our other two, our director and our admin. And just really curating a space that is non-judgmental, I feel like is the best way to start off, which is like one of the most vague things I could probably say in the entire world. It's like, yeah, just like send out non-judgmental vibes. Because that's easy to do. and very practical and has a lot of like really clear action steps. So,
I mean, I
but
think
just
there
like,
are some ways to do that for sure with through your
yeah,
language and like what you're talking about and your images
yeah,
that you're using. I think that's something that I mean, if you do social media, like you have to kind of
yeah,
be mindful, like you're not always using white people all the time. Like that's like
yeah,
that's not inclusive.
yes,
Like that's super something like you have to think about, or using men all the time, like that,
mm,
because that's generally been the identity of the sport.
yeah. Showing different stories and
Hmm.
showing like, okay, like this is how you can do it. And just like showing, I think also showing like the real side of things too. Not that just like pretty picture, like, okay, everything is great, blah, 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 blah. But just like giving practical tips, showing that like, hey, if you like want to show up and you don't want to use the water stations and you want to wear a vest because you feel like that's more adaptable to you, that's great. You can, and because we're a smaller race, we can do that as well too. I understand that there are like if you're like the Boston Marathon, there's safety concerns and like obviously the history of the bombing and things like that. We're not wearing vests, long and short of it. But it's a smaller race and we only have like 4,000 people for the weekend. So it's kind of like, okay, we can get away with a few things that like the bigger races can. We can be a little bit more lenient about things, even like keeping our finish line area open. Like this year was the longest time I've ever stood at the finish line for the half marathon. And I'm happy to stand there until the last person like crosses. And that's exactly what I did. So like our finish line cuts off at 3 hours and I had the last person cross around like 4.5 hours.
Mhm.
So, but just showing the same level of enthusiasm for those people, which usually I actually have more enthusiasm for those people because I end up crying because again, highly empathetic human. Um, because I'm so proud of them and they are also usually having a more highly emotional experience than say like the person who came in around like 2 hours for a half marathon and just like this is an average performance for them and they're like yeah this was a nice time. I'm like yeah that's cool, I'm glad you had a nice time. But being able to show the same level of enthusiasm for people, I think is like a big thing too. And I think especially when you come to like the trail ultra community, like being like, you know what, you didn't have a good day today, but you tried really like giving the same amount of respect and kindness to someone who finishes the whole distance that they set out to finish, as opposed to the person who also DNF and just being able to show that same level of just like enthusiasm, kindness, and empathy to everyone who you encounter I feel like is definitely a good way to curate an inclusive space. It's not the only way, but this is just like my preferred method as your favorite vibe-based human,
So
if
how
that
do
made
you
sense.
how do you see
No.
the digital spaces and like m- maybe helping or harming the running community? Like we've talked a lot about like in through our episodes about some of the harm that's been done online in the running
Mhm.
community. But I guess like how can we contribute to like helping it more to be what we would like to see in the world?
I think sharing real stories is kind of the best way to do it, honestly, like showing up as your authentic self and not sugarcoating it because I feel like what happens when like we get that negative kind of feedback and those negative images is when people are that happens when people are sugarcoating things, creating images that are not true to who they are are only showing a very like highly curated part of their story. I mean, for me, like the thing that always and this could just be me living in Massachusetts and like being around this like more than the average elephant is, but the culture around the Boston Marathon really gets my goat. Like, it's really on the charity people. It's a real thing. I've run Boston twice. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been in the city, like, as a runner and not as a runner. And it's not a kind environment. It's not a
Mhm.
kind environment, and, like, you don't want that. And a lot of it is, like, from the people that I know who are like this, a lot of the people who have qualified, and we will not mention any names, the people who have qualified wanting to put out a persona of perfection and that kind of like a tint of holier than thou. And that's where we start getting into like that bad social media category where things are just like curated to the point of like not really telling the full story and not being realistic and also being very exclusive at the same time and being like, I earned this. This is mine. You can't have. as opposed to like, for me personally, just sharing my story and like, hopefully my aim is that someone will see it and identify with it and feel empowered to partake in running or walking or whatever the sport is or whatever there's going on in their day. Like, just to be able to like keep moving, whatever that means to you, walking, running, and just like existing and feel like you're not alone and that if someone else did this, I can do it too. And I think that's a big way to kind of frame social media is sharing your story so that way you're bringing people in instead of sharing your story so that way you're creating a level of exclusivity around a circle of exclusivity around yourself and essentially also like running or whatever the thing is that you're doing at the same time. We want people to feel like, and also just kind of being like accessible, I feel like in a way too, either accessible in like what you're putting out, whether it's like visually, audibly, or just like in the way that you're speaking, and or also just if someone has a question, they can ask and you'll share your honest opinion with them and just trying to be neutral and sharing that opinion to it if you can and just being like, "Hey, this was my experience. You can take it as you like." And just not being like, "Well, you need to talk this way or you need to do this." It's like, "No, no, 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 no. We all get to make our own choices. We don't need to do anything. What you need to do is fuck off. But what I need to do is up to me." So that kind of I feel like social media is a really powerful tool. And
Mhm.
obviously it's part of our everyday lives, whether unless you live in the God bless you if you're a monk that lives out in the woods. Like I don't know how you're doing it. But for most of us, it's a big part of our everyday lives. And to
Mhm.
be able to like see things that we feel we identify with and are empowering us instead of making us feel left out or belittled, I think is a good place to start personally.
Well, I think that one of the things like that I remind myself and I try to tell other people is
Mhm.
that one, you better be humble or prepare for life to humble you.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
because it
Oh,
might
yeah.
not be me
Big
that does the
time.
humbling, but life will eventually humble you if you're going to be very like,
Mhm.
egotistical and running, being like, with the people who qualify for Boston versus who run it on volunteer bibs or charity bibs. And, and
Which I
then
will
two, I
say
think
that
it like,
I've this is my I was gonna say charity fundraising is like, in my opinion, personally, like 10 times as hard as like because I'm currently wrapping up my third charity race that I've run. We just wrapped up like fundraising $4,000 for Team for Kids, which is my charity of choice, and I love them to bits and pieces. But it's very challenging to fundraise money. And I really don't think people fully like these people who are living in this like silo of like faster is better kind of they don't understand the challenges and the stress that comes with fundraising. Like it's a whole other animal, you know.
Mhm.
well, and it's still like it's creating like these false like social hierarchies that really
Mhm.
just take away the joy that really is at the core of all of it. Like even if like you're, a charity runner versus, trained person who qualified for Boston versus like an elite Olympic level athlete, we're all
Mhm.
doing this for fun and because we like it.
Yes. This is we're not
That's it.
most of except for like 5 or 6 people, we none of us are winning prize money.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
the top, like, 2 or 3 from the wheelchair ladies and men's divisions are and some of the races non-binary, New York has a non-binary division, like, those people are winning money. The rest of us, it's just for shits and giggles. Like, that's it. So, don't kill someone over that. Like,
Yeah.
don't kill someone else's, like, joy either. It's not worth it. Like, I'm a big proponent of like calls to like when it comes to, like, energy and, like, life just kind of, like, lifing, you know? And if you put out a negative energy, you're gonna draw more negative things around you. But if you put out a positive energy, you're gonna draw more positive things around you. And we can all see that in our lives. Like the people who are miserable, like they like to hang out with other people who are miserable, and the people who are joyful, generally speaking, have other people. You meet their other friends, and you're like, "This makes sense." of course, Juliana would have a friend who's like a clown or something. It's like, yeah, no shit. Like, or like does some weird like musical theater thing or has like purple hair. Like, it makes sense. But it's like, it's, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Don't take away other people's joy. It's not worth it. It's not the move.
We just photographed and ran a race a couple weeks ago, and the race director heavy in the recovery community, and he has a rule on
Mhm.
their signs throughout the entire race, and it's Rule 62, just don't take yourself so damn seriously. And
Uh-huh.
every time I'm at one of his races or he promotes it, he always I mean, it's on all of his stuff, and it's
Mhm.
just that elitist behavior or that kind of, like, shunning out of others, and it's kind of the direct opposite of why we're out here to begin with. We're, trying to
Yeah.
stand with the community, be supportive of one another, and not take it so serious. Now, if you're chasing PRs or you're trying to improve your time or podium, whatever it is, I mean, obviously, we wanna take our goals and ambitions seriously, but if it's about exclusion and separating ourselves in a hierarchy of, "I'm more important because I finished in this time," or "because I qualified," or this, that, or the other, it's like, hopefully those people distance themselves because that's not what we stand for. We're here
Yeah.
to feel included and to support one another. And I really think that, I hope to see that shift more. I've never been a road runner, so I've never ran like Boston, anything like that. I don't aim to. I think that sounds very iconic just because of the history there. But you do see that translate to the trail running
Fun.
community as well. And when you see it, it's kind of like, hmm, it definitely is alarming in ways, but I do see this push, especially, as we're speaking about it for there's no place for that here. So I'm glad that you're bringing
Yeah.
attention to that as well.
That makes me even more upset to like hear about it in the recovery community too, because that's really such a community that like obviously you clearly very much so identify with. But like there should like any barriers, like we should not be putting them up because we want people to feel like they can access whatever resources they want, need, or like should have, like as easily as physically possible. It's very hard to be in the middle of some kind of mental like battle and then someone be like, well, you can't have that. And this is like one resource that you want our community that you want to partake in. Like that's just awful. You also reminded me of something when I was talking to the guy from the Boston Bulldogs again, the recovery running group. He was telling me, he's like, it's not serious and it's all fun until it is. Because like we're preventing people from reaching that, like we're having fun and we're doing a silly fun thing and running to prevent
Mhm.
death. It's like, yeah, we're having a nice fun time. So that way we don't get to the point where we are in a relapse or we are in that point where we like are having a sparring contest with a bottle or with death or with whatever your drug of choice or vice of choice is. It's serious until it's not serious until it is because we want to prevent people from reaching that serious thing. And you want to just have fun. That's all it really is. Like we just want to have a nice fun time. And if you don't want to have fun, then you can go do something else. Bye. Go away.
Agreed. Yeah. I like that you point that
Mhm.
out as far as
Definitely.
that sparring with death, because for me,
Hmm.
I keep bringing up personal experiences, but it's like this running, was a saving grace in my life until I found recovery, and it kinda guided me to it because I utilized it as the tool of honoring myself, and I feel like so many people do that in combination with therapy or a recovery program, and when we're in that space, we are fighting for our lives in essence.
Yeah.
It's a way of honoring and saying, I'm gonna spend my time chasing my potential and my boundless limit or my unlimited potential and not set these boundaries out for myself that I'm not capable of these things anymore. And I might have a hard time, I might DNF, I might struggle, but I feel included and safe here. And I think that's so important to even say that, right? Is
Hmm.
to feel I feel safe doing this and even if it's uncomfortable. And I do really appreciate that there are so many recovery communities within the running community and
Yeah.
it helps push us further down that healing journey. And I'm just so grateful for that. And to know that that is also where you are is such a big role in your community as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because like I have an addictive personality, but I've never like been addicted to like alcohol or a substance or something, but I've had a lot of chronic illnesses my entire life. And it's very interesting to me to see how like similar the journeys that you go through are because it's a lot of like loss. It's a lot of loss of control and it's a lot of living to learn with the demons you know versus the demons that you don't. And like you have to exist with whatever it is that's happening in your body, brain, and what have you, whether you like it or not. And you have to find a truce with that and find a way to like be okay with things not being okay, which I feel like is this is why I'm like I make a great ultra marathon runner because I'm fine with being in that zone of not being okay because I've had all these weird surgeries and all these things and I take like all these meds and all these things, but like it's just like you have to be okay with not being okay and finding a way to exist with the things that are happening in your brain and like depression, anxiety, whatever it is, addiction. It's hard. It's hard to live in your own brain and being able to use running to facilitate that and also prove to yourself like my brain is lying to me right now. My brain is telling me that I can never do this. And then you go out and do it and you're like, yeah, fuck you, brain. Here I come. Look at me. I am a badass. Ha 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 ha. Um, and having other people around you who are like are part of the community being like reaffirming that in for you, I think is a really vital thing to have no matter what you're dealing with.
I just need to
Definitely.
take a moment.
Def-
What you just said was like, I was like, wow.
Ser- Serving
Very
verses
well
over here, you
said.
know.
Holy cow.
I've been going through a lot of health things recently, and Julia, I've started my like internal, like my real internal work recently. So like I started EDMR therapy the other day, like 2 weeks ago. I just had like I started with a new acupuncturist who was like very like I'll call her like woo woo and like energy based, and like we went through like some nice stuff like that. And again, I am committing acts of witchery. I am out here becoming a witch.
I
So
love
like,
Well, I'll have you know that I am an EMDR therapist. So I'm
oh,
the one
are you?
who waves the fingers to then
Oh,
help you
okay.
unlearn the spells the society has taught you and reprogram
Mhm.
there
yourself.
she there she goes.
Yeah, I just started we've only done, like, 1 session with, like, the
Yeah.
eye movement so far. The first 2 were intake sessions.
Hmm.
But, I mean, I've been in regular therapy for about 8.5 years with my current therapist, and I plan on never leaving her until she passes away. So, like a long-standing order. But, like, being able to work on these things they also think I have some kind of neurological development, like, neurological challenge.
Hmm.
I've been like tripping over my feet recently. It's not the best thing in the entire world, but it is what it is, you know? And just like learning to be okay with that, but like working on neuroregulation techniques that I can do on my own because they think I have some kind of dystonia, which largely isn't really treatable if you want to keep being a moving person.
Right.
If you want to paralyze the muscles, you can, from what I gathered. But like, I don't
Mhm.
want to paralyze my muscles. I want to like still keep moving, but working on like neuroregulation and things like that is something that I can do that one has no side effects. And two, it can be really powerful. I've had the thoughts to myself very recently. I'm like, Julia, you are a powerful witch.
Mm.
Like, because I think I didn't realize like how much energy I was like feeling and giving out and stuff too. Like even earlier today, like I have the guys at the radio station, like everyone is around me and like listening to me intently. I'm like, wow, I have a lot of power. Like not in a way where I'm like, wow, let me abuse that power, but I'm like, oh, like
Right.
I can help other people feel better. And like even at the Cape Cod Marathon, they've dubbed me the master of vibes. Instead of the MC, I'm the MV because like I am just here to like create this like energy around me and at the race. And so that way people feel welcomed and included and excited to be there and proud of themselves too. So
Mm.
I scream at everyone, you ran a marathon, yeah, man. Like I'm screaming at I professionally yell at people. And it's great. So yeah,
Acupuncture
it's
brought up acupuncture though, and you're talking
yeah.
about like being this light and guide and hope for others. And one thing I found with acupuncture, and I'm just gonna, again, share my experience, but
Oh
is
yeah, go for it.
it was the most meditative healing experience. I worked
Mm-hmm.
at a chiropractic office, and I was more focused on my physical body, not my spiritual body. And when I worked with this doctor, she I attribute it to her, but it was almost like all that energy I expend in my career and as a mom and as a wife and as a caregiver, I got that back in this
Yeah.
beautiful way through acupuncture. It was like I had to lay still, from experiencing
Uh-huh.
it. And you have to be present. You have to have this like internal connection to your body, but your spiritual space. And it was such a way of like re-regulating that nervous system. And I can't speak higher of acupuncture. What a beautiful healing
Same.
journey for like the physical, but for like pouring back into that cup and saying like, I'm going
Uh-huh.
to take this 25, 45 minutes to allow my body to heal and recover. And
Yeah.
so I think I'm so glad that's a part of your journey too.
I love acupuncture. And like, I also, something I was thinking about when you were talking was like how much we don't realize like our emotions and like our thoughts and our feelings and just like things are pent up in our system, like how that affects us, that like emotional energy, and how our emotional health is just as important as our physical health. I can just speak from like one, my personal experience and my experience as being a dietitian too, because like largely like 90% of the work that I do as a dietitian is I'm a food therapist because people don't realize like I'm dissecting the connection that they have with that like traumatic event they had when they were 6, with like the fact that their dad screamed at them every time they ate bread or something like that. And this is why we've reached that point. Or like I worked at the VA for a while and like dissecting, like people are like, oh yeah, I only ever eat like once a day. And it's like, yeah, because when you were in the army, you were told to like, this could be your, and they will binge eat because they're like, okay, this is your last meal and we don't know when the next meal is going to come. So you eat as much as you can and you only have 30 minutes to do it. So they're like so used to that being it and they just don't register and make the connection between like real life now and like what has happened in their past. And me just be like being able to connect the wires and be like, oh yeah, okay. So we've identified the behavior. Now let's work on changing it so that way it's healthier for us as a human as we are right now. But it's that like emotional connection to like food, but also just like experiences and also just like the good old attitude of our parents of like just like shove it in your brain and don't think about it and just like don't ever address it. Like that's not a good attitude to have. I remember when my dad was like, I was going through something hard and he was like, well, just don't think about it. I'm like, I don't know if that's the best. This could be not the best choice. I mean, I was in therapy still, like already at this point. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. So me and Ann, my therapist, were having a great time chatting about everything. And I actually talked to her about this too. But like I was like, yeah, that's that good old like boomer attitude of just don't think about it. Don't deal with it. It's not real unless the problem isn't real unless you think about it. Whereas I'm in the camp of like, let's just think about it now and deal with whatever the emotions are and let them come to us. I describe my brain as like a messy attic. But the stuff is gonna be shoved the stuff, like, started out being shoved in the corner of the attic, like, you know how a messy attic is sometimes, there's just a lot of shit in the back corner. That's kinda how I feel like my brain and my body is, and I'm slowly working on cleaning the attic up. I'm not removing anything from the attic largely, I'm just putting it in organized bins and identifying the items that I'm working with, so that way I know, like, what's in like, if I like, something happens, I'm like, "Oh, that goes in the ADHD bin," or, like, "That goes in, like, uh, the, like, ankylosing spondylitis bin." Whatever the bin is it belongs into, or if I need to start a new bin, that's fine, whatever. Just being able to identify the things that are happening and like process through them and then like neatly put them away so that way I at least know that they're there is like my kind of like one take on my brain and like how I approach things as a therapied human.
Yeah, there's
I
so many things to unpack and unlearn. I think that's the hard part, like from our parents, from our like childhood experiences, from our family, from society. Like you
Mhm.
could spend all the time thinking about where everything came from. I think that can be helpful. I find that when I'm working with someone who is like highly anxious or a little bit on the OCD spectrum, I would say that I have to talk to them about like the addiction to finding the cause and the reason for everything. And I'm like, sometimes we don't have to. We can just
Mhm.
decide that we don't like it and that we don't want to do it anymore. And we just have to continually practice
Yeah.
doing something different. So it's like, it's always a balance with everything.
Mhm.
But I would say, like, kind of tying in like therapy with acupressure or acupuncture. Sometimes you can do detox while you're doing EMDR therapy or other types of therapy. And that's where they put just the needles in your ear
Oh.
to help you like calm and
Oh.
release some stress. And then it can kind of help facilitate you to be a little bit more open for the EMDR, the other therapy. So it can be combined with your mental health therapy if you wanted to add the detox in the ear. And you can find like trained providers for that too.
Yeah,
I
I'd be open to that.
I have these acupressure seeds that the acupuncturist gave me for anxiety, so I have them in my drawer, and if I get and now I should probably implement them more than I do, but you can just press that
Yes.
spot with the seed, and if you're feeling overwhelmed or
Mm.
anxious, then it triggers that calming as well, and I think I got them from
No.
her, but she guided me to get them from Amazon too, so you have them with outside of the session as well.
Mhm.
Okay, I definitely need those. You need to send me the information on those. This is something I must purchase.
Just put them in
Like
your ear, not in your drawer, and leave them there for 2 years.
Yeah, the
I'm
tools that we
also the
learn
purveyor of
tend to help if we use them. I
yeah.
find that
Yes.
I'm
I do
also
the same thing.
yeah, I do too. I have every single physical therapy tool under the sun. Granted, I have been using a lot of them recently, but it's still like, okay, I have things that I bought that I'm just like, I'm gonna use that, and I definitely didn't. And that's that for me is personally that good ADHD kicking in. It's a nice time. We love a shiny new item to be like, wow, this is gonna solve all my problems, and then it doesn't, and then we forget about it, and we're like, okay. So that's just my personal experience, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there's at
I
least
think
one
I
other
think
person
we're
who
all
identifies.
neurodivergent on this call, so you're in good company.
You're good company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Involvement.
I feel like largely the more people I meet, especially in like the trail ultra community, there is a lot it's like 99% like neurodivergent humans who are just like out there. Like you talk to someone and you're like, wow, I didn't realize you were thinking about rhinoceroses the entire time of this. Like that's that fun that you have that special interest, my friend. And then you go about your day, and it's just like, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, what's happening, isn't it? And then you start talking to me, and you're like, that's this girl is wackadoodle. I'm moving on to the next person, and I'm like, I'll see you later. Bye. I miss you already. Love you lots. See you when we get to the finish line.
The trail conversations really are the best though, because they are each person that comes past you, it's so
All
different
unhinged.
time and each perspective, and it's such a different dynamic each
Uh huh.
as each personality goes by, so you can have it's almost like multiple therapy sessions each time.
Uh-huh, and I feel like they're also very unhinged. I mean, even, like, when Ben and I went running the other day, we were talking about, like, ways to mentally get us, through like, the running and stuff, and we started, like, naming things backwards in the alphabet that started and, like, making, like, zebras, we were, like, trying to make sentences with the letters, like, with only words of that, and we're just running around through the woods, like, screaming these things, and I'm just like, "Wow, anyone who hears this is gonna be like, these people have, like, long lost their minds somewhere else, maybe at the trailhead, maybe before that." But it's a nice time, though. Yeah, I'm a human who really loves to be unhinged, and my brain is just, like, waiting to do something, like, silly and dumb at all points during the day, so, for me, it's a nice time.
I think there's a beautiful side to that, and it's like how we could be spending that time otherwise, and to me,
Yeah.
that sounds like way more fun than sitting at a bar stool for, like, the rest of my life, so I appreciate
Yeah.
talking
Mhm.
about rearranging the alphabet and anything versus not knowing where my mind is, you know? Or in
Yeah.
a I guess another way, not knowing where my mind is.
Yeah. I think it's just also being able to, like, give yourself permission to, like, be yourself, maybe be a little bit silly, and just kind of do something that you maybe weren't expecting out of yourself, or just kind of, especially for me, like leaning into my ADHD and just like riding that roller coaster of like, okay, like putting myself in a safe space, like when I'm like running with my friend Ben, and just like, because he has ADHD too. And so we're both like strapped into two separate roller coasters that are like running next to each other and like crossing paths and like mentally. Um, and so we're just like both like stopping mid sentence and starting a new conversation half the time. And like it's nice. We just ride that roller coaster, and we let it come to us. And it's a nice time. But giving yourself permission to do that is hard. And
Mhm.
like just learning to just ride the wave is really challenging.
Now I
So
have a
that's
question for so
yeah.
I also was diagnosed with that as a child and definitely
Hmm.
am ADHD. But,
Yeah.
have you dealt with challenges as far as having that identification as a part of, like, how you operate in your life or in running? I The reason I ask is because there's this common narrative that I've been seeing where people are like, "Well, I just don't like labels," and, "Yeah, you
Yeah.
could be ADHD," but and they almost are dismissive to it. It's like, this is literally how I function, and it helps me understand why I function the way I function. And I
Hmm.
find that I don't wanna say more commonly, like, in the running community, but in, like, the health community, where people wanna kinda
Yeah.
dismiss that that is a thing and that it actually affects our day to day. And I'm
Yeah.
curious if you've run into that as well or anyone else around you.
I feel like for me, what you're right, it's like saying and identifying as an experience happens to me with the ADHD, but it's more, I feel like you're talking about like gaslighting by medical professionals, gaslighting by other runners, gaslighting by friends, sometimes family members. And I think gaslighting, and I know gaslighting is alive and well and thriving in the medical fields. As your favorite chronically ill human, I have seen many, I calculated out how many doctor's appointments I went to in the last 6 months because we've been in a flare up. It's been bad. It's not been good. And we'll just put it with that. I went to 101 doctor's appointments in the last 6 months, which is not okay. But I will confirm in that gaslighting is alive and well, and it still is like thriving and living its best life. But it's something that no matter if you have ADHD or if you have like any other kind of like mental condition, I feel like largely what I'm going to call them as invisible illnesses, things that
And
don't,
invisible disabilities. Yeah.
yeah, invisible disabilities, invisible
Mhm.
illnesses, like collectively as one, if unless someone can see exactly what you're dealing with, like you're limping, you have a prosthetic leg, you're in a
Right.
wheelchair, their first reaction most of the time from majority of people is to dismiss it,
Mhm.
especially within the healthcare community, which is so upsetting. Mostly from like traditional healthcare providers, I will say, like people who are like in mental health, like those are the good, usually the good eggs for the most part, and people who are kind of like in that kind of like preventative healthcare space. I'm gonna throw like dietitians, PTs, OTs, people who like don't prescribe medications largely. Those people are usually a little bit less dismissive, generally speaking, and speaking in big generals here, than say like a doctor or a PA or a nurse practitioner or someone who's like like prescribing any kind of medications or like surgeries or whatever. But like being able to like show up in a space and not feel like you're being gaslit, I feel like is really extremely valuable. And like within the running community, I feel like there are people who just like really don't want to acknowledge the fact that they probably have ADHD. Because I also feel like most of the runners that I've ever met have some format of ADHD or ADD. Like it's a very like we are people who can't think straight until we get our daily dose of energy expenditure out of our system, which is a very, I feel like, from my experience, like ADHD, ADD, like trait. And like whether you identify with that or not, that's fine, but you shouldn't really poo poo other people for being that way. And I'm definitely a lot like you, Brandy, where I love a label. because like I just want to know what I'm working with. Like, and I'm totally the person who's like, Juliana, what's wrong with you? I'm like, okay, do you want the short list or the long list? Okay. Because there's a lot on that list, my friend. Uh, the things that I personally think are like challenges that I need to work up against or like clinical diagnoses that we're working with here. So being able to have a label for me, I feel like is empowering. And I think a lot of it depends on how you personally come at it too. Like for me, again, like I feel like it's an empowerment to know, like, okay, I'm not just making this up. Someone else has reconfirmed it for me, my experiences as a human here on this earth. Whereas other people view it definitely as like a someone like discounting them or being like, this person is not as good as they were before because they now have the diagnosis of ADHD or they now have whatever diagnosis it is. And I think that's the what I'm going to use one of my Juliana-isms here, which are like weird things that I say. This is a you problem, not a shoe problem, which means that this is on you and not whatever else you're trying to blame for like being the problem here. If you don't want to own up to your challenges, your disability, your ADHD, your ADD, and like take it on and like see it as a piece of empowerment or just like knowledge that you can use for yourself, that's a you problem and not a shoe problem. Like you gotta do some internal work on that bad boy because you changing your shoes or whatever, or changing like whatever like healthcare professional you're seeing isn't going to change what your brain is wired as.
Right. Well, and I think too, it does a disservice to like being in denial too,
Oh yeah.
because then it's like, then you're kind of walking around the world thinking that you're a neurotypical and engaging in the world in a neurotypical way when that's not how
Yeah.
the world and most people experience you either. So I think that can be like they're doing a disservice to
Mhm.
themselves because like they don't understand like how whatever that neurodivergence is really impacting them and their relationships. It's hard to make the connection if you're in denial. So I
And
think
then I
it
feel
is
like
like,
you're really just like oh, I was gonna say you're really just like you're dampening and like like silencing your own personality
yeah,
if you're not
yeah.
able to like fill every crevice and like own up to everything that's inside your brain and your body. Like you're giving up on yourself essentially in a way. Like you might not realize it, but you definitely are if you're not able to just like make peace at an absolute minimum with what's happening in your own brain. You're never gonna like live your best life if you can't even be honest with yourself.
I think it's such a
Yeah.
freedom too when you're able to own that space or just
Mhm.
that label. Like we've stated, is it's almost like, huh, okay, well, I'm
Yeah.
not a lunatic. It's like I function this way, my brain works this way. And I just find so much solace in that ability to take ownership of it and not feel ashamed by it. And then you see, I don't know, maybe it's just some people I've seen or been around and they're like, oh, yeah, that doesn't exist. And you're like, but it does.
It
Like
does.
it does. And so
Yeah.
common. And it's such a common thing. And I
Mhm.
just love how you broke it down because it's so important for us to be able to not just identify for ourselves, but so that others, if they are struggling, they can feel like they relate with us too and feel that sense of community within a community and say, oh my gosh, I'm the same way. Or hey, let's go on this run and have this wild conversation because our brains are so
Mhm.
similar in their own
Yeah.
way and feel that safety and security and validation. And I think we all seek that as human beings, but definitely when
Mhm.
we're sharing, 10, 15, 20, or more miles together.
Isolation is the deadliest tool you can use.
With
100%. Like,
Mhm.
if you feel isolated, that is where you are going to start making really bad decisions because you feel like you are truly alone in everything else that you are experiencing. And that's
So
where the big guns are going to start showing,
so then that leads
in my
to
opinion.
really good the question. If you could speak directly to the athlete or the runner who feels unseen and discouraged and left out of the support and left out of the sport in general, what would you want them to hear?
Definitely that they're not alone. There's no way. in all of hell that you were feeling that you were alone. And if you need something, all you have to do is ask. Like, all you have to do is ask. There are so many people here who are more than willing to help you out, and that I am happy to be the jumping off point for that. If I'm not the person who can solve your problem, then I know the person who probably can, and I can point you in the right direction, because statistically speaking, we are all different human beings, and there's no way that you are the only person who has ever experienced this in your entire life. And this is coming from someone who has just recently been diagnosed with some very rare conditions. And I also know for a fact that, one, I felt isolated, and two, also that I am definitely not alone in all of that. You might have to look a little bit harder depending on what your situation is to find the people that you identify with, but they exist. They're definitely out there, and you're not alone. And struggling is a human experience. And if you're struggling, probably everyone around you can identify with that. And just, yeah, don't self-isolate if you can. If you can, like, identify that and like just talk to someone, anyone, let them know, like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And hopefully someone you feel safe talking to. And then just take it from there, little baby steps. One step in the right direction is one step in the right direction, no matter how small. That's what I say.
Yep, I think that's accurate. Yeah, even like I live in a
I hope
very
so.
geographically isolating area, and it's a gray area. It's beautiful, but it can
Mhm.
be very hard to find your community because there's not a wide variety of people here. And
Yeah.
so I think that's one of the things that I try to remind myself and other people is that, like, your geographic location does not matter when we have access to the internet. We might not be able to get to the people we need in person, but they are out there, and we just have to be ourselves in order to find them. And then once we
Yeah.
find
You're
them,
never gonna find someone unless you're honest with yourself. You're never gonna find
yeah.
someone who identifies with you, because, like, if you're a zebra and you're trying to find, like, other lions, that lion's probably just gonna eat you, because
Yeah.
they're not. You think you're a lion, but that lion knows. Like, the other animal knows that you are not part of, like, you're not part of that community in a way where you're trying to parade as part of that community.
Right.
Whereas if you showed up to the herd of zebras, they'd be like, "Friend, best friend," and you'd be like,
Yes.
"Yeah." And you'd have, like, a wonderful, nice time if you could be honest with yourself that you were a zebra and not a lion.
I
I do
love
like a metaphor. If you hadn't noticed, I do. I love a metaphor.
that was perfectly said.
Well, anything else that you'd like to share? Or do you feel like that you've kind of touched on all the points that you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, unless you guys had any other questions for me, I feel like I did a fair amount of talking. Hopefully, people aren't completely sick of my voice.
No,
Uh,
joy. I'm just like, go ahead and tell me, like, what a joy you are, and so appreciative of everything you had to say. I really just think it was an honor to just hear you share so much. So thank you for being vulnerable and candid. Not that I feel like
yeah,
you maybe felt vulnerable because you just seem like you stand in your truth, and that's badass. So thank you.
I'm honest to a fault. I've always been that way. It's just that, like, after 8.5 years of therapy, plus a lot of introspection and, like, doing a lot of work on my neuroregulation recently. I mean, I've just kind of always been like this. This is just like the amplified version and of it.
I get that completely.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But I'm so excited that I got to chat with you ladies. Like, this is wonderful. And hopefully, at least one person listens to this and feels like they're not alone out there, which continues to be my mission, again, with Runnah, and with, like, just me existing as a human in general. Just making sure that, like, even if I'm doing something hard, I'm doing it so other people realize that, like, they are not alone in whatever they're going through, and that they can do it too. Because people are constantly like, "Oh, Juliana, you've run ultra marathons and you've done, like, all the world marathon majors pretty much and all these things, and, like, I wish I could do that too." I'm like, "You can. I
Mhm.
have nothing on if you write my medical health record on paper, everything screams that I should not be doing any of these things. Like, that I have nothing that there are no advantages to be had over here that make me any better than anyone else at if anything, I'm running at a highly discounted rate, you know? But Like, if I can do it, then you got it. Like, I know for a fact that if I can do these things, there are so many other people who can do whatever the hard thing is that they're trying to do. So you just gotta like have like at least a touch of confidence in yourself, fair amount of support from like other people around you, whether it's mental, physical, whatever, and just do it. Just kick it. We'll pull out another Julianaism here. Chuck it in the fuck it bucket. Sometimes you just got to do that, you know? Like you've reached a point where you can't think about it any further and then you've done all the things you got to do and you just got to chuck that thing in the fuck it bucket and just go. And that's it.
Well, thank you
Very
so
well.
much for sharing your voice and your story and your heart with us today. I really feel like you've given us all a lot more courage to show up and advocate and just keep creating spaces where everybody can belong. And so, to our listeners, just thank you for joining us. And if her story resonated with you, please share this episode with somebody who might need it. And check out her podcast at Runnah, Runnah, and see what you think about that, which would be awesome. And share that as well. And remember that the Paincave it's not a place where we break, but it can be a really great place to begin.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Runnah. This podcast is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Juliana Coughlin. Brought to you in part by the Falmouth Running Club and the Falmouth Community TV station. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram and on TikTok at RunnahPod, and you can send us an email at runnahpod@gmail.com. And our original theme music was brought to you by the one and the only wonderful Jeffrey Hutton. And keep up the great work. I'm proud of you.